Today we're going to talk about advanced homesteading and self-reliance, self-sufficiency. I lived that lifestyle back in the late 80s, and I wonder when that was. It's a long time ago. And I did it for about 8 or 9 years and really enjoyed it. There have been so many changes that people interested in this kind of lifestyle, ought to think twice about what it was like to do one back then and what is really difficult to do it today. The demands of modern life and really a lot of government regulation is getting in the way of the simple living. So, what did I live through? We went up on a road that was almost impassable part of the year and created a homestead, which meant that we were going to raise our own food. We were going to be responsible for everything that we did, including our baking bread, but not just baking from a box. It was like a grain that we had to mill on a really good mill. And we went all the way back to the pioneer age, I guess you could say. And we really enjoyed it. It takes about 2 or 3 weeks to get used to that lifestyle. And then you like it and the guests don't. But we had a wood stove for all of our heating and a lot of it cooking. We would put meat inside the wood stove. It had a baffle, and the meat would come out bronzed about, maybe 15 minutes later, and then we'd boil some water, maybe to do dishes, and on the wood cook stove over in the kitchen, and get the cold goat milk, right out of the ice box, because in the ice box it looked like a size of a concrete block of ice. It could just get down, about 5 miles away, and they had a nice ice chest that carried that kind of thing. And when we needed something from the hardware store, it was just perfect for our lifestyle. Today, the hardware store has fallen in and is not there anymore. The ice box, Lord knows what happened to it, but it's probably got ice that's made into little figures or something. And even the feed stores don't exist anymore in terms of getting feed easily for the animals, a supplemental feed. And we really enjoyed ourselves because we had a lot of support system. Even the veterinarian was easy to work with, inexpensive, and so forth. And we had no power. Why didn't we have any power? Well, we were built our home already built for us in the Needmore community, and it was so far back in the Lake Road, which is now called Dovebill Lane, that nobody ever thought of having power back that far. Why would you have a great big electric box sitting in your front yard? The main problem we were having was water. We had to haul 55 to 75 gallons of water every day for our animals. Now, how do we haul that water? Well, we didn't take a basket on top of our heads or anything strange like that, or on a couple of buckets on a yoke. We just got in our pick-em-up truck and we went down and filled a bunch of containers that used to have chocolate, and they were scrubbed out, and those containers would be about 8 gallons or so, and we'd bring back a whole bunch of them. So we had a good, clean utility water, not too far away, maybe half mile. And we also had, a lot of weight we were throwing around. So this is a great way of not only getting water, but also getting hernias. So it was one experience after another. There's almost always complementary experiences when you try something new. We would take the bedding out of the goat barns. Yes, we had goat barns, a lot of them, because we had a lot of goats. And we showed goats, which is the way we actually made some of our money. We would go to the state fairs in Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, Kentucky. Oh my goodness, we were on the road. And our animals did very well. Breeding animals was probably passive income, good income, relatively speaking, for people in the middle of nowhere. I was teaching school at different universities at night, and that was fine, but grading papers without any light was not easy, so we had to use Aladdin lamps. And every few days we had to go fill the lamps with our barrel of 55 gallons of mineral spirits. You know, why mineral spirits? Well, it smelled a lot better than kerosene in the house, and it burned cleaner. And but that's the only light we had. Eventually, we got a light bulb out in the barn because you wouldn't want an open flame out there. 15 water is all we could pull, and we pulled it through the woods on a orange cord, and that cord just barely held 15 watts. We've tried things like that, putting a real fry pan on, electric plug-in fry pan on a cord like that. It took about 2 minutes for the fry pan to die. So we were living a little bit in the middle of nowhere, although within a few minutes with a pick-em-up truck we could get somewhere. But we were still far from town, far from jobs, far from income, and it meant that homesteading was not easy. The simple living isn't so simple. Sometimes, particularly according to the guests, it looks a lot like poverty. You know, it took us a long time to get the house sited, partly because we were saving every little wood chip and every little extra piece of wood for the wood fire we would use, which was our only heat source. And we spent quite a bit of money. You'd think that homesteaders are not rich, but you almost have to be rich to get this started, which is kind of silly. But we got quality wood stoves, and it pretty much heated the whole place. Now, that's what I did a long time ago. Today, everything's changed. I was an urban planner, so I was behind some of the zoning authority and rewriting of the code. I like to think that I created a better code that was more friendly to homesteaders and people that wanted to live off the grid or live without all the conveniences. But even then, I was surprised. I know one of our cases of people wanted to expand their home and have they had plenty of money for an outside covered porch. Well, the rule said you can't put one in because you don't have a septic permit. And so, wow, that's something I had to enforce, and I didn't like to enforce that, but that's a good way to lose friends. Politicians, zoning authorities can lose friends pretty quickly if they don't watch it. However, the zoning restrictions in many communities, or near many communities, are so tough, it seems like the corporate world or the government group want to not make life simple, but make life a cash flow to their pockets. I know I'm being a little critical of those individuals, but my goodness, the rules are so strong. So if you're going to create your homestead, and we're going to talk about this, you want to make sure that you check all the regulations out and fit your whole dream in between what can really work and what feels good and what is the idyllic lifestyle that you're after. It may be that you have to compromise some, more of a hybrid homesteading experience. For example, if you were to build, even in a rural county, you might have to have 150 foot of road frontage. Well, a lot of homesteaders want to live about 2 miles back, ain't got no road frontage, so they can't build. Why have a rule like that? Well, people didn't want their cars driving past way back in the hills, and they were on the hill and they were in the valley, so they could use their telescope for their peekaboo of the house in front. So we understood that problem that the houses in front had, and we made it 150 foot of road frontage. But if you want to treat a subdivision, it begin to look like long stretches of driveway and then a bubble for the house place. Well, it looks stupid to have a bunch of driveways that are part of the lot that's maybe a quarter mile or a half mile away. So the zoning restrictions really get in the way. There are even many locales that have almost made homesteading illegal. Even at the state level, you got to check that out. You might need so many acres. You might not be able to have two houses on the same lot without subdividing. There you go again. Maybe the second house has to have 150 foot of road frontage. In the good old days, we used to be able to get an easement really easy. I guess that's what word easement means. It means it's easy to get back there. Something other than an off-road vehicle. However, it's gotten tougher and tougher. So the selection of your site has to be very careful. And today it's just almost you have to select the right state, the right county. At least you're left with a bunch of other homesteading friends that are trying to live a simple life. Now, what does everybody else live? Well, a confusing life filled with regulations and ordinances. They're probably breaking many of them and don't even realize it. The number of animals they could have is restricted. My daughter, for example, she had for years about 15 dairy goats, and they use the milk for their drinking purposes. So the county came and said, you can't have those goats there at all. And he said, wait a minute, they've been there a long time. Am I not grandfathered in? I said, oh, let's see. I don't think so. Let's have to have a board meeting. So actually I went as a planner, and I was retired at the time, so it made it a little better, and told the board that at least you ought to give them a number where they can be self-sufficient with their milk, because their children are allergic to cow's milk. I mean, I don't know how allergic they were, but that was a tool in my box. The point is that if they can't find a regulation, they'll make one. And you say, well, what's the problem with dairy goats in the boondocks? Well, the drainage might get down to the farm field, which of course is filled with herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers. Then it might drain another half mile to a creek, and then the creek runs into a water supply lake. Well, that all makes sense, except the wastage from outbuildings moves about 6 inches a year at the most, and I've tested it. Now, when I walked into Brown County as the planning director, now Brown County is a wonderful place, and I got along just great there, which is kind of strange, but I like the people, I like their point of view. And the first case I had was this person couldn't do their show dogs because they were above a pond. Well, how far away were they? Well, about 200 or 300 feet. Well, I said their problem with the dogs utilizing their necessities out in the yard only moved about 6 inches a year. And how many years is that to get over to the pond? They said, oh, we don't know about your statistic. I said, let's do something special. Let's build a sand trench, or it could be a peat moss trench, about 3 foot deep, about 3 foot wide, between the pond and the show dogs. And they had about a dozen show dogs. And I will test that sand and I'll test that foliage every single year to make sure there's no drainage into the pond next door. Now, who came first, the dogs or the pond? Well, the dogs did. Did that make any difference? No. They wanted to use the pond for swimming, and I don't think their water supplies are what they wanted, but still. And it makes sense they wouldn't want to pollute the pond, but they had no chance of polluting the pond. I proved it, the case over. So they'd already spent 2 hours on the case. It took me 10 minutes. It's all about trying to work things out. And having a privy out there in the boondocks, That won't work. You've got to have a septic permit. So your septic permit maybe costs you $800 or more, and then if you put in a field, then it has to be able to not back up or get gray water anywhere on the property on the surface. And so you have to be very selective on getting something that soil that will absorb rock and soil that will absorb the wastewater. Well, that kind of makes sense. However, finding that kind of special site is not always easy. If your land is up and down and up and down, you may never have a good site for your septic. And we'll find one. We'll find one. Well, if you find one, then it's so far from the house, it's going to cost you a lot of money in piping. So your $10,000 septic system now costs $20,000. Now, when I talk about this is real life. And this is what you're going to run into if you try to do simple living, self-sufficiency in this day and age. So picking your location is very, very important. Then what about trying to build a house? Okay, you got to have a housing permit. Okay, what kind of house you going to build? Well, you got to build one to standard construction details. I guess it has to withstand a certain level of snowfall and about anything else. And it has to be a certain size, 150 square foot per person of living space within the home. So if you've got a big extended family, you can't live in a home that's a tiny house. You can't live in a cabin legally that is just 800 square foot. Even the state says you got to have 950 square feet. That gets rid of a lot of old mobile homes. That's why they did it. So in other words, you can get trapped in the procedure of paperwork, just trying to live simply. It makes no sense to me. So a new home. Now, what do I suggest? I like the homes that are built now with concrete that is full of holes on the inside, and it's very lightweight. And then you put a plaster coating or a good paint coating on the outside and inside. And those blocks, you can lift them up above your head, assuming that your arms work and you're not too old. And you can build that kind of Lego house by yourself, or maybe a couple of guys or gals can come over and work on the weekends, and up goes your house. And guess what? The inside is the inside, and your outside is your outside. You don't need any more insulation because you have all that airspace within the blocks. Then you face your home to the south and get passive solar heat. Well, I said, what are we going to do about trapping that heat? There's a lot of different kinds of tile that you can put not too far from that window and get the sunshine. And on days that you want the extra heat, just pull the drapes back manually, not with some sort of internet device, and heat up your tiles, and there you go with a warmer house. You say, well, that sounds pretty good. Now, how much does a house like this cost? Well, at least half of what normal construction would, maybe even lower. You can just get friends to put it up. What do you do about all the piping? Well, you can even do piping not through the block or through specialized woodwork, but you can do it, kind of behind things using, copper pipe or regular pipe or CV, encasing all the wiring and all the plumbing. You wouldn't want any mice eating the wires because it would be unfriendly to the mice. And so you just have to be inventive. In order to live simply these days, you have to be a hacker in terms of new ideas. Maybe you never even tried before, but you try it and see how successful it is. Can you live with it? And you have all these options. The new house has to have a driveway which you can get up and down. Nobody's going to come and plow a driveway that's over 8 degrees in slope. And you're far away from town in order to get far away from the rules. And so maybe a driveway that could handle emergency vehicles, but is not too much of a slope. So your site on the property needs to not be the ideal high altitude site. It's got to be a little bit more in the middle. And when you build your house, you got to look at your tree lines and so forth and have them shelter the north side, northwest, west, and then open more to the east and the southeast and the south for passive solar and also for the light within the house as well, and protection from some of the winter, at least in this latitude, the winter problems that we have. So that house, I have a friend that built one just like it, and I liked it because I saw how it was built, and I could pick up one of those blocks, you know. And I've done some masonry before, and this was simple. This was easy. We could get this up in a weekend, and that'll save money. So what about other houses? I kind of like the Deltec homes, which are 8-sided prefab, comes out of a factory in North Carolina. You can get a glass panel for a glass part of the octagon. You can get a heavy duty panel for another part of the outside wall. You can just get a wide variety of panels that slip together with a metal connection between them. It takes about 2 days to put it up. It comes on a great big semi. Again, you'd want to have a site that you can get to, and you can put your Deltec up within a week or two. And the big problem is of putting all your utilities in. Well, you want to reduce your utilities, and you want to use your piping and wiring more efficiently and more like in disguise mode instead of breaking everything open and pulling wires through the ceiling. So this kind of rustic living, you can actually cut some corners and save some money. Now, in that house, would you have an indoor bathroom, an outdoor bathroom, a composting toilet? Let's take a look at this if I was going to build something for myself. And again, I really like the Deltec design, the 8-sided. Frankly, let me mention something on that. I would actually make a large building in the main section, the center section, maybe a 32-foot, 36-foot octagonal building. And it'd be my main building. Then I'd have pods, 12, 14, 16, 20 square foot pods, all 8-sided, and they would sit there around, surrounding the center. The design work I've done on this will show a basement underneath the main house, which can be used for all sorts of things. Kind of a root cellar and storage, and maybe a game room or a nice relaxing room, TV room, or whatever you've got TV. And then you take a door into a tunnel under a walkway to the pod. Why a tunnel? This is all your place for storage and food storage. It's critical if you want to live off the grid and live the simple life to have a couple of years of food ahead. And you say, well, how do I do that? Well, it's pre-select stuff. Even myself today, I buy vacuum sealed containers. Food lasts 10 years to 25 years. And you never know when, I don't want to cuss, but things can happen. And food like that would be really valuable. But that's where it all goes, so it doesn't clutter anything. In the tunnels. Why the tunnels? Well, any weather you're in, you just go through the tunnels. Now, what's above the tunnels? A really nice walkway, maybe brick or stone or wood chips or whatever you want to use, concrete, and then glass walls so your greenhouses are there. So you make your greenhouses above the tunnels. And how many greenhouses do you have? It depends upon how many tunnels you've got. So 3 greenhouses to 3 tunnels would be great. Who lives in the tunnels? The kids. Get them out of the house. No, anybody, or you could have a writing studio or a game room or an exercise room or like a entertainment room or whatever. You say, well, entertainment. Why would you want entertainment out in the boondocks? Believe me, we are all suckered in to entertainment. In fact, there's so many beautiful documentaries these days. Even the environmentalists are starting to love videos. And we want to be connected, at least that way, remotely or long distance. And then we have everybody wanting to work at home. Well, there's no good paying work within 25 miles or further. So maybe that's an idea. Well, how can you work from home? Well, you get a business that allows you to do that, or that's your main business, and then have some side businesses of writing or music, or you name it, some sort of counseling business over the phone. And you can get your phone wires back there pretty easily. But really, I prefer to have a power source. Now, solar, wind, I love wind if we can get it, because both go together and cancels out your electric bills really well. But it's got to be enough to power a more modern lifestyle embedded in a simple living situation. So this hybrid, you're going to have to get used to a lot of, I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to be self-sufficient, yet I'm going to connect myself remotely to the best stuff, the stuff that maybe my kids can go to homeschool and utilize the different resources on that. Why would they want to go to homeschool? Well, would they want to go 25 miles to school every day on your pickup truck? I don't think so. Would the school bus come that far out? Nope. So you got choices there. What if your kids get older and they want a job? How in the world are they going to get a job 25 miles from town? They have to have a car, insurance, place to live. They'd have to have like several grand in the bank before the kid can move out, which is a big problem. I don't know what the rural poor, where the mom and dad are also poor, do for their older kids that are 30 years old now and can't afford to go to town to get a good job or get an education, 2-year degree that creates some sort of kind of a quickie mechanic or electrician or medical technology career, whatever they like. And I kind of recommend that if you've got something like theater or music or something that's artsy-fartsy that you really love, being an athlete, that maybe that's your hobby or your minor, or that goes along with a little bit better education that could pay. Particularly, we need to start doing education as if you're not going to be having to go to the office. For one thing, that saves all the commuting, saves all the fuel in your pick-em-up truck. And what about that fuel? Maybe you could have a vegetable oil as a fuel or some other fuel. Some people used to use kerosene and change the engine for that. The problem is that when gas is low priced, like below $3, it's more cost effective to use gasoline. Hybrid is ridiculous because you have to find a charging station. It's a good idea, but we're not quite prepared for that yet. And it may not work that well on your pickup truck. It might be too expensive to buy the truck in the first place. So we've got a problem with transportation. And so you're back in the boondocks with friends. We say, what do you mean with friends? You probably know the people a quarter mile away better than you knew your neighbors in your damn subdivision, because there's a congeniality and a love of nature, a love of hunting, a love of fishing, a love of splitting your firewood, a love of actually creating for yourself, instead of relying on everybody else. Um, and we do rely on everybody else. The state of Illinois, they produce all that food in that good land, that dark land, and over 96% goes away from Illinois, all their food, and they get 4% for themselves. So they need more gardens and more localized to agriculture in order to feed themselves. So it'd be nice to be able to grow your own food. For just a moment, I want to get back to the housing design. I really love the Deltec, and I love the concrete block with insulated holes inside of it. And I like some of the cabin kits that you can make, so at least your home looks rustic. And what about getting an old house? Well, the old house is probably grandfathered in for a lot of the problems you'd have with the law, so that might be good. But sooner or later, you want to add on to the old house, they won't let you do it because you don't have a good septic. And composting toilets never worked for me. It may be that they weren't ventilated properly. And in some cases, you still got to have your septic tank and your septic field, plus your composting toilet. And what do you do with the septic field? Just leave it alone, because all it did was match the regulations. So you can see I'm a little bit anti-authority, and I see and enjoy listening to people who have that same point of view. We need authority to not get in the way of people's dreams and hopes and good critical thinking and good innovation. They're getting right in the way of simple living and making it too complex. Often the younger you are, the stronger you are on regulation. Wait a minute. So when you get older, you get more anti-authoritarian because you've been bounced around too many times. Okay, old house. You can't add on very easily unless it's got modern facilities, and you probably have to put up outbuildings. You say, well, I've got an old house, I'm going to put another house nearby. But if you subdivided, your land, you got that regulation. Maybe that other lot doesn't have road frontage. Oh my goodness. What are you going to do when your old house only has 150 foot of road frontage and you need 150 foot of road frontage for your new lot? You're blocked. Now, who in the world are you going to bribe? You begin to think that way, and that's not right. So you have to be careful even with older homes. You have to worry about mold and dry rot. Get under that puppy and check those timbers, make sure they weren't made out of something that starts to look more like a termite nest than a bunch of beams. So an older house can work, but you need to check it over very, very carefully. And essentially work out all your planning strategy for your place, your localized plan, in great detail with all the shoulds and woulds and blocks and how you can overcome it. Okay, what about raising a lot of animals and raising a lot of food? This is not as easy as it used to be. Where are you going to get your plants? They used to be, 5 miles away. Now they're 25 miles away. Where are you going to get your seed? Well, that can be done, but seed is not as easy to grow. You need a little bit of extra air on those seedlings in order to make them stronger. You can save your own seed, which is a good idea. And I really like, in the gardening, I like three-season gardens. So you have done a lot of research. I like to do research. I mean, And I plant kale and broccoli and cabbage real early. Garlic was planted the year before, and that's my early season garden. And then the main garden, of course, it plants your tomato plants, and when you plant your tomato plants, think about what is nearby, because tomatoes love carrots. In other words, companion planting. Might want to study that a little bit. And your tomatoes need plenty of nutrition, but occasionally they might not need bright sunlight unless they're the Rutgers field tomatoes. You get an heirloom tomato and it might not do too well. Doris, at the end of our talk, is going to show a little bit about what she did to reduce the sunlight on our tomato plants using red, thin sheets of plastic. Red is good for vegetables, just like blue is good for chickens. So you get into more and more science in the simple living. So that's kind of fun if you like science, biology and zoology and insect control, and you want to bring in purple martins for your insect control. Maybe have some bat houses. I mean, it's just filled with a science experiment. If your kids are doing homeschool at home, have them do home projects based on the nature around your house. And you want to encourage all the critters to come and join your lifestyle. You say, no, wait a minute, I don't know if I want a fox or a skunk in my yard. You want to make sure you put Epsom salts all around the perimeter, maybe about an inch wide and not too thick. And it'll actually clear the vegetation around the perimeter, so you won't have weeds next to your fence. And then put it right around your raised beds. Why raised beds? Easier on the back. You don't have to weed because it's all new soil and soil amenities. You can use compost, and Doris has got a compost situation which is, I think, mind-blowing. She should get the Nobel Prize for composting. And that is, she mixes up, and she's really going to want to tell you this, but I'm just going to hint at it. She mixes up all our compost in a big blender and makes a soup. You wouldn't want to eat that soup. I don't think. You might want to give it to somebody you don't like. However, she pours it through all the grass clippings and hay and straw we've got covering the beds. And by the time those plant seedlings hit that compost, they want to grow so tall that they're going to start scratching on the windows pretty soon. We had broccoli this year, and some of the heads were over 8 inches in size. I never saw one of those in Kroger's. This is almost twice that size. What about tomatoes? Yeah, we grew some tomatoes the size of softballs. Can you imagine looking at that at a grocery store? What would you do with it? You know, it's almost too big to use. And there are simple ways to harvest. Harvest is one of the hardest parts of gardening because you got to be there when everything comes in and not let it go very long. The field, the heirloom tomatoes, I just dice them all up and chop. And what's Bill going to do with these? Well, he's got a secret. He cuts corners. I have to admit, I don't do everything out of this thin air. And he goes and gets himself some medium to mild salsa at the store and mixes a big jar of that in with a quart of diced tomatoes from his garden. Well, that's not enough. So he puts in some Bragg's amino acids, which is like soy sauce, about 2 or 3 tablespoons, some garlic chips, some onion chips, stirs it all up, and it makes one of the finest salsas on the planet. And you say, well, that's too easy. How can it be fine? It just is. You know, I tasted it. I love it. Think about that as a layer in your 11-layer lasagna. And 11 layers? Yeah, if you got the time and the simplicity, you can cook. Yeah, how about that? And the food comes from what you do. You have to be a participator in the yield of what you actually create for yourself. You mean I have to be part of my system, my own system? Yeah, that's what it means. So, go out and milk the dairy goats. Well, that takes time, but those goats are so precious. And if you want to make a little extra money, you can sell some breeding stock, but never have a buck on the property. Only one out of every 500 bucks should be kept anyway in terms of conformation and milk supply. Why would you have a buck on a breeding line that milks a couple of quarts a day when you can get a buck that milks 4 or 5 quarts, 6 quarts a day from another breeding line? I like the Alpine breed a lot because they're hardy. You have some work to do. You have to trim their feet, probably every 3 months. You got to worm them. Therefore, you wouldn't use them for meat. You have to and the worming will be out of the milk within about 6 days or less. And you got to take their horns off. You say, wait a minute, I like goats with horns. Yeah, but you're not going to like it when it gets behind you. And I've had a good friend that was charged by a large goat, and these are 200-pound goats. I mean, they're well fed, and they don't look like something, from the Caribbean that has been just grazing on a backyard someplace. The 200-pound goat started hitting him, and he got caught in a fence. He about died. What about a young child around horns? That wouldn't work at all. What about the horns getting stuck in the fence? If the goat has a chance of having an accident, it will. I've had goats that want to get behind the plywood in the barn. I've had goats that go push on the side of the barn so heavy that they can actually begin to squeeze out through a poorly nailed place. Goats are mischievous. That's why they chew on cans. They just think they're fun. They're like toys. If you feed them real well, they won't even touch the food in the cans or near the cans or garbage or whatever. In fact, they wouldn't even eat the bluegrass in the field. They want browse. So you have to kind of study the border of a woodlot and what they like. Now, what does that mean, studying it? You've got to make sure that all the toxic plants are out of there. In fact, I took a certification in urban forestry. Urban forestry, well, same thing as country forestry. You don't want the trees real close together, the hardwood trees. You don't want them 2 feet apart. Think about how beautiful those large hardwood trees could be. You don't want one tree crossing another. And you'll find that if you look at your first woodlot. What about all the branches that intertangle at a height? You don't want that, so maybe the trees ought to be spaced out a little bit. And then all the floor of the forest should be cleared, partly for fire control, and brush cleared. And also you don't want any thorns. There's some plant invasives that you could remove at the same time. So you kind of open up things, and you open up things that get more sunlight and wildflowers, and then you can put more ginseng in the ginseng likes darkness, but it also likes the shade of an ash tree. So you learn these combinations all the time. Actually, about combinations, the term permaculture comes up. And permaculture has been, hot and heavy in the press, particularly in the 60s and 70s, where you work with the property to gain more energy. Back to the wildlife that you're living with. There's more wildlife in a 10-acre plot we're talking about than the local soybean field, and the energy level of that, if you measured living energy, can be as high as 30 times greater. The herbicides and heavy use of tractors that pack the soil, the runoff of chemicals. They've all destroyed a lot of the microlife, and the soil is getting poor and more poor. While your soil is getting richer, and it's attracting all sorts of things that creepy crawl. We actually go to the bait store and buy worms to put in the raised bed, liberate the worms so we feel like we've done some good, in freedom of worms, and get them embedded in there. And then we go get some ladybugs to be the predators, and they're vicious predators, just like praying mantises, and they're fun to watch. And the post office would call, "Your ladybugs are here in the post office, come and get them quick." And we would say, "Okay, and next week we're going to have a big box of bees come in." I said, "We don't want you to come quickly, we want you to come right now, drop everything if they get bees." So getting your hives, we had 36 hives at one time. So I've done the homesteading part at the highest level. Now that creates a wonderful amount of honey that we sold. So there was a little bit of extra income, and we gave it as gifts, friends, or we traded, we bartered. But the barter economy works among other homesteaders really well. If you've got too many eggs, they may have too many eggplant, and so you can trade back and forth, and that adds to the cooperation of all the people in the area. So you become, at distance, maybe a quarter mile or so, but you become more of a community than we see in the subdivisions. You know people's names, you know people's relatives. In fact, why not have them come over for a wild dinner? Well, what in the heck's a wild dinner? Well, how about handmade noodles with rabbit? I said, what? Handmade noodles with rabbit? Yepers. Rabbits, I think, are probably the best meat animal to have. It is so impossible or difficult to butcher animals that you've been pets with. It's horrible for usually the guy, and I hate to be sexist here, but it's often the guy that has to do that kind of stuff. Now, I developed a scared of butchering technique, and I want to tell you about some of my techniques because they're sort of weird, interesting. But I would take all the shoulder, all the back, and all the front and back leg areas, and just bury the carcass, never open up the goat, never have to look in its eyes. I don't do goat head soup. I just don't. I'm too friendly with those animals. Now, rabbits are a little different thing.
Okay, let's take a break anyway.
In terms of finishing. Okay, we went through roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories, and we have 4 more on this sheet. And this is it.
Okay.
These are all just headlines.
Yeah.
So I've talked about food production with raised beds, critter control with Epsom salts, and I talked a little bit about the praying mantis and the ladybugs, and I mentioned the bees, which kind of came in through the back door, but that's okay. One way to raise rabbits, which is pretty unusual, is to do communal rabbitry. And that's done in Denmark and the Netherlands and other countries, quite often, where they build little hobbit houses in a great big rabbit pen. Underneath the ground, they've got that red quarry tile that's used for pipes often in older places, and that's what the runs are. A great big brush pile, peat moss could be added, grass clippings, just all sorts of things that where the rabbits would have a secure space, and that's where they live. They live in their own little dome, and you just need to put the buck in with them about once every week or two, keep the buck away from them, and you feed from the outside, either commercial feed or a blend of home raised feeds as well. But you got to study that one, make sure they get the right nutrients. And wouldn't it be interesting to see a whole lot of little tiny bunnies come out of the result of the buck being with the lady, in her little hobbit house? And you could have a dozen of these under a great big wire pen. And when you make your pen, you ought to make sure that there's chicken wire underneath the pen for anything digging, critters that are digging, chicken wire over the top of the pen, maybe a second layer of chicken wire about 2 or 3 feet high, and then your Epsom salts around the edge, and you're not going to have any critters. You love critters, but you don't want them hurting stuff. And sometimes when you pen up everything, like free-range chickens, and all of a sudden they get attacked by the raccoons or by the opossums. We were talking about dairy goats earlier, and they're a fascinating animal to work with. They're very hardy. They don't need much in the way of veterinary care if you feed them well. And they eat a lot of hay, and they eat a lot of browse. You got to make sure that your woodlot, which they could go into, is free of toxic weeds. So you have to know something about toxic weeds and get those out of there. I like the fencing that's cattle panels. They're about 16 feet long, 5 feet high, and they've got heavy metal squares. That'll keep anything out. It'll also keep the goats from getting, a leg through another kind of wire or something caught up in the fence itself. Goats are not really scavengers. They're kind of particular if you feed them real well and make sure they have a good mineral block out there in the field, so their nutrition is good. Now, the milk is the smallest molecule you can get. Therefore, the flavor is greater. If the flavor is so great, then when you milk, it's going to create odors in the milk. So you filter the milk within seconds of milking, right there in the barn, and then do a second filtering when you bring it in the house, and it'll last, 10 days in the refrigerator. Before it goes to the refrigerator, we often put a lot of milk in the freezer and a lot of fruit in that same container and stir it up, and we make a frosty ice cream, kind of like snow ice cream out of the fresh goat milk. You can't make butter very easily because the buttermilk level, the butter fat, is not real high with goats. But you can make a lot of yogurts. That goes well, and mini cheeses. I love to make goat cheese. And you can make a quick goat cheese simply by bringing it up to a boil with a great big pot. And you don't quite get to the boil. It just starts barely rolling. Turn it off and add about a cup of vinegar, and suddenly it coagulates. As soon as it's hot like that, you start pressing it. Now you want to add caraway seeds or blue cheese. Remember, the goat milk attracts odors. That's why you want to double and triple filter it. And it's more digestible, and it's often said to be better. In the 1940s, 50s, most hospitals had a dairy goat herd to feed their infants or their milk intolerant people and their elderly. It was higher level nutrition. So that's why I love the goats in part. The rabbits are kind of taken care of with their unique situation. If you want to create grains, it's really hard to create grains of any quantity. So you maybe barter for those, for rice or for wheat or oats, or we used to even get feed oats at the mill, and then try to clean all the chaff as well, and then just cook up oatmeal, and a lot of it. Now, how much would a bag of 50 pounds of oatmeal cost? Well, less than $10. 50 pounds in the store, bought in small containers, would cost about 5 times more. So you can have some cost savings by living this way. And it's kind of fun to dream up new ways of working with your food. The wonderful thing about homesteading is all the exercise you get, all the science and thought you get, all the biology, the botany, working with insects that are predators and plants that help to repel insects, like a black locust will repel aphids. And you start studying this, and you start living not by chemicals, but not by the seat of your pants, but by your brain. And it's good for the brain to like stretch itself into self-reliance. So here's a happy way of life, but a hard-working way of life. Everybody needs to sign an invisible document saying, I have a strong work ethic. I take care of animals that are yelling at me that they haven't been fed yet or haven't been milked yet. I love the animals. If one gets out, I have to have the patience to go get it. You can only imagine if the dairy herd got out in hunting season. Well, that would be a bad deal. There's a lot of hunters that couldn't quite understand that mountain goats can be beautiful like this and look like dairy goats. But that's just kidding them. I think most people that are well educated kind of understand the whole picture. But if you like hunting, this kind of lifestyle is for you. You look at your seasons carefully so you don't get arrested, and bag some game in the areas that maybe are overpopulated with certain species. And you can talk to some of the DNR people and other woodsmen and other hunters as to where the hunting would make a difference with the quality of life of the habitat. Fishing is right open for you to really enjoy the different ponds in the area. In fact, having your pond on your place would be a great idea, because you could have a big wire basket and raise your own catfish inside the wire basket. Why would you not have catfish loose? They stir up all the mud and make it hard to go skinny dipping. We've talked about everything you can think of, kind of a conversational mode. And I love the idea of simple living, love the idea of self-sufficiency, and I certainly encourage it. And I would love for you to see this video and spread the word that it's out there, and it could be kind of fun to watch.